In the Second World War, a new generation of planes takes aerial combat to deadly new heights.
The F-6F was designed with one purpose in mind, and that was to defeat the Japanese Zero.
Dogfighters.
The basic strategy of the Me-262 in combat would be to come in from above, high and fast.
Dive bombers.
The idea was to release the torpedo within 2,000 to 1,500 yards, penetrate the hull armor, and explode with devastating results.
Carrier planes.
Official Navy pictures show a deck load of death ready for delivery.
And daredevil pilots.
I wanted to be a torpedo pilot because I felt that's the place I could do the most damage.
The skies are the battlefields for the wings of World War II. Allied forces launch an audacious plan to liberate Western Europe from Nazi control. The D-Day invasion begins with an intense bombardment of the French coastline. Above the rain-soaked beaches, fighter pilot Archie Maltby provides cover for Allied troops.
We took off just right at dawn, and so they were landing when we got over there. You couldn't help but bleed a little bit for the guys that were down there.
Along 50 miles of heavily mined shoreline, more than 160,000 Allied troops struggle through a gauntlet of exploding artillery and machine gun fire from German strongholds.
The water was already red around the edges. It looked like a mixture of hell down there.
Maltby is a member of the 365th Fighter Group, nicknamed the Hellhawks. He spends D-Day in his Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, attacking Nazi planes in the air and bombing targets on the ground.
Gee whiz, we could carry a 1,000-pounder on each wing. 4 50 caliber machine guns in each wing, a lot of firepower.
Nicknamed the Jug for its milk jug shape, the P-47 is designed to take on Germany's best planes, such as the deadly Messerschmitt Bf 109. Known for its superior climbing and diving, the Me-109's weaponry is a dominant force.
The Me-109, they had a 20-millimeter cannon on it that was pretty effective. You didn't want to get lined up with that too well if you could help it.
The P-47 needs to be nimble enough to outmaneuver the Me-109s, but it also has to escort Allied bombers at high altitude, creating a daunting technical challenge for engineers. At 20,000 feet or higher, the altitude of many bomber escort missions, the air contains about 10% less oxygen, decreasing its density. The P-47's induction system, which measures and directs the flow of air into the engine, is less efficient in the thin air.
That's why airplanes are always faster and you get more horsepower at sea level rather than way up high.
Engineers solved this problem by adding an innovative power booster called a turbo supercharger. Through a complex system of ducts, both the exhaust from the engine and outside air are channeled into the wheel-shaped turbo supercharger behind the cockpit. Inside, the air is tightly compressed, boosting the percentage of oxygen before sending it to the engine.
The end result is you get cool, compressed air at a high altitude, which typically isn't attainable, but is because of the turbo supercharger.
With denser air pumping through its engine, the P-47 is now capable of high performance and maneuverability at low or high altitude, making it an ideal patrol plane for the D-Day landings and more than a match for the German Me-109. In the weeks after the Allied invasion of Normandy, Maltby and his P-47 face a test from a group of Me-109s.
We just came off the run, and the top flight was being attacked by 109s. So I just turned into them, and I closed too quickly, and I fired, and this guy blew up right in front of me. It was amazing that the P-47 could actually turn just about as well as the ME-109.
For Maltby and the Hellhawks, the turbo supercharger transforms the P-47 into one of the deadliest combat planes of World War II, demonstrating how technology and innovation will help the Allies during their push toward victory.
The feeling that I have for the P-47 is very simple. I owe my life to it.
After D-Day, Allied forces are rapidly advancing against Nazi Germany from all sides. American and British bomber aircraft streak through the skies, determined to decimate the remaining industries fueling Hitler's war machine. Many of these strategic bombing raids are escorted by a valiant group of African American fighter pilots. These World War II heroes quickly earn a reputation for fierce fighting in dangerous conditions and tenacious defense of the bomber aircraft in their care.
Our job in the 15th Air Force was to protect our bombers. We would protect them against enemy fighters.
The thing was, get those bombers home. I don't care what else, get the bombers home.
Dedicated fighter pilots William Holloman and Robert Friend belonged to the 332nd Fighter Group, known as the Red Tails, because of the distinctive red paint on the tails of their airplanes.
That was so that the bombers wouldn't have to call and say, who are you or what? He could look out and say, oh, that's the 332nd because they're the Red Tails.
The men of the 332nd are among the first African American pilots admitted into the United States Armed Forces.
Prior to their existence, there was a feeling that African Americans weren't capable of flying aircraft under combat conditions.
At the time, many places and organizations in the United States, including the military, deny people of color the same rights and opportunities given to white people.
I didn't like people telling me what I couldn't do. They didn't want me. They were going to accept me. We were determined.
In June 1941, the U.S. Army Air Corps begins training black pilots here at the new Tuskegee Army Airfield, a racially segregated military facility in Alabama.
When you signed in with the recruit, if you didn't say you were white, you went to Tuskegee.
After their training at Tuskegee, Holloman, Friend, and other airmen of the 332nd eventually are stationed in Italy at Ramatelli Airfield, a captured enemy base now used by the United States.
When they moved to Italy, in Ramatelli, that's when eventually they picked up their assignment that they're best known for, which is bomber support.
For the long bomber escort missions against Germany, the Allies need a fighter plane with long-range capabilities. There's one clear winner, the North American P-51 Mustang, a fighter plane with high power and maneuverability in combat. The P-51 can fly hundreds of miles farther than other Allied fighters.
The P-51 had much more range. When we were flying the P-51, the missions were like 7 hours.
The Allies need the P-51s to go deep into Germany, and to accomplish this, engineers utilize an innovative external fuel tank that attaches under the wings, nearly doubling the available fuel.
America, land of abundance, learns to mobilize its waste, to save its scrap, to provide more metals for war.
Wartime metal shortages inspire engineers to create these tanks using a waterproof chemical compound of paper and glue. The glue-infused paper is shaped over forms, assembled, and coated with a fuel-resistant lacquer and aluminum paint to make them sturdy yet disposable. When the fuel is used up, pilots can drop the empty tanks, improving the plane's aerodynamics. These resourceful drop tanks allow Holloman Friend and the other P-51 pilots to gain as many as 900 additional miles of flight, more than enough for their missions across Europe.
The P-51 really was the only American fighter that was able to fly with the U.S. bombers all the way to Berlin for the missions that really hit at the heart of Germany.
Red tails bravely fly nearly 1,500 missions, most in the P-51s. They protect bombers with such heroism and gallantry that they're given the Distinguished Unit Citation. But even with such honors, they still face social injustices in the military and at home.
I think that in some ways, segregation, racism made us a stronger group. We realized we were trying to prove something, that we could do the job, and we were committed to that.
Later known as the Tuskegee Airmen, these courageous African-American pilots break down stereotypes and pave the way for racial integration in the United States military.
I'm proud of myself at being there and proud of all the fellows that I served with.
The Allies' dominance in the skies forces Hitler into increasingly desperate measures. 3 months after the D-Day invasion, a massive explosion rocks West London. The blast kills 3 people, wounds 22, and leaves a 30-foot crater in the ground. The mystery explosion is thought to be caused by a gas main leak. But people soon learn it was the result of a terrifying new weapon created by German scientists. It's called the V2 rocket and nicknamed the Vengeance Weapon. Fired from far away in hidden locations, the rockets are prepared by a unit of German artillery specialists, like Franz Stahl.
Also, war eine Wunderwaffe, ja. Also technisch gesehen war es ein Wunderwerk da.
Germany in wartime had really advanced technology. They were desperately looking for the thing that could turn the tide of the war.
The V2 rocket has a range of 200 miles and stands almost 46 feet high, taller than a 3-story building, and it's the first long-range guided missile in the world.
It was a good way to get 2,200 pounds of explosives to a target. It just followed a path until it crashed into the ground and exploded.
Traveling at 4 times the speed of sound, the supersonic rocket approaches its target in silence. The victims never hear it coming. When it lands, the massive explosion is powerful enough to obliterate an entire city block.
Dass man am Tag 3-4 Mal angeschossen, wo der runterkommt, war uns ja auch egal.
The V2 rockets are built underground through a top-secret Nazi program.
Schweigen ist erste Gebot. Jeden Tag musste man unterschreiben, dass man keine Briefe oder sonst was, keine Fotografien und so weiter machen. Alles, was hier passiert, Schweigeverbot.
To save costs on production, the Germans use slave labor. Over 6,000 political prisoners, POWs, and Jews, victims of Hitler's genocidal Holocaust, are brought from the Buchenwald concentration camp. They're forced to work in and build the underground tunnels where the rockets are constructed. Thousands die from the brutal conditions. In an effort to make the rockets less effective, the bravest of the prisoners attempt to sabotage them, even at the threat of execution.
Die haben viel Sabotage gemacht. Also, und dann auch schlechtes Material zum Teil, vielleicht, man weiß ja nicht. Das war unberechenbar.
As a result, many of the rockets fail to launch, often with disastrous consequences.
Also wenn abgeschossen wurde, 150 Meter, das war mindestens Sicherheitsabstand.
Without the benefit of today's GPS-guided rocket technology, the V2 has to be carefully aimed on the ground toward the direction of its target. Once launched, an onboard guidance system helps the rocket maintain its trajectory during flight. This system consists of 2 gyroscopes, freely moving rings and disks that pivot around an axis. As the rocket moves, the main axis of the gyroscope disc remains stable. Data recorders measure the movement of the rocket's gyroscopes against their stable axis, which determines the rocket's position. This data is sent electronically to controls in the rocket's fins, which make slight corrections to elevation and direction, preventing it from losing control and crashing. But the gyroscope is still primitive and doesn't have much bearing on where the rocket ultimately lands.
You could be relatively accurate. You could hit something like London, but you'd have a hard time hitting a specific block within London.
30 Kilometer hin und her oder vorher zurück, also das war gang und gäbe. Wenn sie da oben raus war, dann kann man sagen, sie kommt irgendwo runter.
Most of the rockets are fired from hidden locations and aimed at the cities of London, England, and Antwerp, Belgium. They cause massive damage, inflicting heavy casualties on the civilian population. In London alone, the rockets claim over 2,700 lives. By May 1945, near the end of the war, the Nazis launch over 3,000 V-2 rockets.
Das Geschoss kann man sehen und dann den Flammenstab kann man sehen am Himmel, dann den Scheiner beobachten und dann war es Ende. Also so war es ein Meisterstück.
The V-2 rocket proves successful as a terror weapon, but Germany is unable to stop the wave of Allied forces.
Was hat uns der Krieg gebracht? Nur Verluste. An Menschen, Material und an Land. Und die anderen haben gewonnen. Ne?
The V-2 rockets, built by slave labor in concentration camps, are one of the darkest chapters of the war. In the Pacific Ocean, Allied forces fight to liberate the Philippine Islands from Japanese occupation. The United States Navy's Third Fleet patrols the dangerous island waters to support the Allied troops and intercept the Imperial Japanese Navy. On October 24th, an American reconnaissance plane spots nearly 30 Japanese ships in the distance. The American aircraft carrier USS Intrepid gets the order to attack the enemy armada. Ben St. John is one of the U.S. Navy pilots who will make the attack.
We were waiting for the fleet to show itself. Every ship had torpedoes, armor-piercing bombs set aside, reserved for the fleet.
St. John flies a Grumman TBF-TBM Avenger, a rugged three-seat torpedo bomber with a powerful engine and folding wings. Torpedo bombers are designed to carry and release a 2,200-pound torpedo, a self-propelled missile packed with deadly explosives and deployed to sink enemy ships.
I wanted to be a torpedo pilot because I felt that's the place I could do the most damage.
In his Avenger, St. John joins the third wave of aircraft that launches from the Intrepid to assault the Japanese fleet. As his plane nears the enemy ships, he sees one of the largest warships ever put to sea, the Japanese super battleship Musashi, the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy.
It was obviously the biggest thing we'd ever seen, and with the most guns. The anti-aircraft fire was intense, more than we had ever seen.
Musashi was roughly a third larger than anything in the United States inventory.
To make their attack on Musashi, the Avenger torpedo bombers must maintain a consistent speed and altitude. But this creates an easy target for the Japanese gunners.
Now, if you stayed straight and level for any length of time, they knew what you were doing. So it was a case of picking your spot, dropping the torpedo, and getting out of there.
Unlike the bombs dropped from an aircraft that explode on impact, the Mark 13 aerial torpedo is designed to fall through the air and then travel through water toward its target. The torpedo is dropped from an altitude of up to 2,000 feet and enters the water at an angle between 22 and 32 degrees. If the water entry angle is wrong, the torpedo can plunge too deep or skim off the water's surface, damaging the torpedo or throwing it off course.
In our mind, we knew altitude and what speed we had to have to get that thing to go in the proper angle.
The torpedo's impact with the water trips a valve, sending fuel to the motor that runs the attached propeller. Once it reaches a preset depth and distance, the torpedo becomes armed to explode on contact with the ship's hull.
The idea was to release the torpedo within 2,000 to 1,500 yards of the target and then turn away. If your aim was right, the torpedo would hit the target, penetrate the hull armor, and explode with devastating results.
Waves of fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo bombers pummel Musashi with more than 30 bombs and Mark 13 torpedoes.
The Musashi was pretty much out of order as a result of the attacks from the USS Intrepid.
Eventually, the super battleship sinks into the ocean.
The Musashi sailors had a song, the refrain for which is, "The Musashi is unsinkable. If Musashi sinks, Japan will sink with her." And of course, that's precisely what happened.
After 3 days of fighting in the waters around the Philippine Islands, the Allies succeed in breaking Imperial Japan's command of the Pacific Ocean in one of the largest naval battles of modern times.
I can look back on it now and say that's exactly what I trained for, and to hope and pray that I managed to handle it properly.
With the Grumman Avenger and the Mark 13 torpedo, St. John bravely helps the Allied forces win the battle and continue their drive through the Pacific. It's a similar story in Europe. American and British bombers strike from the skies, deep into the Nazi heartland. The Allies attack Germany's forces with an around-the-clock bombardment.
Der Amerikaner flog ja meistens tagsüber und der Engländer nachts. Also da sind wir geflogen, Reichsverteidigung.
Eric Brunot is a pilot in the Jagdgeschwader 51, one of the most decorated fighter wings in the Luftwaffe.
Meine Gruppe, mein Jagdgeschwader, wir sind bis zum letzten Kriegstag geflogen.
He flies the famed and much feared Focke-Wulf FW190.
Und die Focke-Wulf FW190, die mit ihrem Bullenmotor, die war wieder klasse, um runterzugehen.
In combat, the FW190 is sturdy and deadly, with a powerful 14-cylinder BMW radial engine.
It flies well, it's fast, it climbs well, and it performed well. So, I mean, all around the Focke-Wulf 190 series was just an amazing aircraft.
Throughout World War II, engineers at Focke-Wulf make modifications to the FW190, introducing updated models. Brunot first experiences the A model and remembers its rugged frame.
Die Focke-Wulf 190, die war für mich also mehr für mich im Ausdruck mehr Lastwagen als PKW. Die hat das breite Fahrwerk, rechts und links, also Tragfläche aus der Breite.
But as the war grinds on, American airplanes become more advanced and soon fly higher, farther, and faster than the German FW190A. In order for the FW190 to keep ahead of the curve, German engineers replace the engine with an inline V12 engine that is lighter, faster, and produces a lot more horsepower. After A, B, and C models, this now becomes the D model, nicknamed Dora. It's a powerhouse with the speed and versatility to attack high-altitude bombers and their lethal fighter escorts.
Die Dora 9 ist die verbesserte Focke-Wulf 190, nur mit dem Unterschied, dass sie einen langen Reihenmotor hat. Mit dem riesenlangen Motor, der Gegner nannte uns ja die Langnase.
The longer nose adds more weight toward the front of the aircraft, creating a new problem for engineers.
That greatly affects the weight and balance of the aircraft.
A plane's weight and balance is a crucial aspect of aircraft engineering. Adding this new engine moves the plane's center of gravity, the point where it's perfectly balanced in the air, forward. This can cause the nose to point downward, making takeoffs and landings more dangerous. If the nose is not level during flight, airflow over the plane is disturbed, destabilizing the aircraft. To correct this imbalance, engineers are forced to make further adjustments.
They essentially had to make the tail longer or put weight back there. They just took a plug, so to speak, or just another extra like 18-inch section of fuselage, and they just patched it right in and just made the fuselage a little bit longer.
With the weight and balance now corrected, the improved Dora becomes a formidable fighter.
Das war das schnellste Flugzeug, was ich je geflogen habe. Im Kampf und so weiter war die Dora 9 unschlagbar.
But as effective as it is, the Dora comes too late in the war. Germany is unable to mass produce it quickly, and the sheer number of Allied aircraft overwhelms the German defenses. Bernat flies missions in his Dora throughout the war.
Als der Krieg zu Ende war, da waren wir selbst erstaunt. Haben wir die Maschinen schön aufgestellt, haben die übergeben.
After flying over 560 missions, Bernat reluctantly surrenders to Allied forces.
Dann wurde er also ich persönlich wurde mich nicht fertig, verdammt nochmal.
Though the Dora's engineering advancements are still admired to this day, they're not enough to turn the tide of the war. Allied forces, led by the United States and Great Britain, have broken through most Nazi defenses in Europe. The Allies advance rapidly toward Berlin.
The full horror of war returns to Germany.
Lieutenant Ernst Dieter Bernhard is a fighter pilot in the Luftwaffe.
Unser Optimismus war schon längst nicht mehr vorhanden, meine ich. Da war sehr schnell klar, dass wir das nicht lange durchhalten konnten.
In a last-ditch effort to turn the tide, Germany destroys its own bridges over the Rhine River. This creates a 700-mile-long natural barrier that brings U.S. ground troops and supply convoys to a standstill. American forces are able to locate and capture the last bridge left standing, the Ludendorff Bridge in the town of Remagen.
Die Brücke von Remagen war ja nicht gesprengt worden. Das hatte man also irgendwie, war da was daneben gegangen.
Hitler orders the bridge at Remagen to be destroyed at all costs. German forces throw every bit of weaponry in their arsenal at it, including deadly fighter planes. One of these aircraft assigned to attack the bridge is the Messerschmitt Bf 109, which Bernhard pilots on his daring mission over the Rhine.
Kriegt man alle eine Bombe unter den Vogel geschnallt statt des Zusatztanks und sollten dahin fliegen, um die Brücke zu zerstören.
Bernhard's bird, the Bf 109, is the pride of the Luftwaffe since its introduction in 1937. It has fought in nearly every major German engagement of the war, from the invasion of Poland to the Battle of Britain to the assault on Russia.
The Bf 109 was designed to be different from the start. It was a truly modern airplane.
Designed with a sleek, lightweight, all-metal structure, the Bf 109 can slice through the air at high speeds. And it boasts an enormous amount of firepower. In addition to its wing-mounted guns, it has a 20-millimeter cannon built right through the center of the engine and propeller shaft.
The Bf 109 was really a force to be reckoned with. In German hands, it shot down more aircraft than any other fighter of World War II.
One of the Bf 109's most modern features is its body, or fuselage. Many airplanes at the time are built around a steel or wood frame for support, but the Bf 109 uses what's called a monocoque structure.
The monocoque design meant that the weight and stress was carried by the shape, not by an internal frame.
A monocoque structure works like an egg, with the load of the structure carried by its exterior shell. By eliminating the need for interior support, the Bf 109 is lighter, faster, and more stable in the air. But like an egg, the monocoque structure is more fragile, and anti-aircraft fire can easily puncture it, leaving Bernhard vulnerable during his mission at Remagen's Bridge.
Das ist eben der Nachteil, wenn man die mit 109 oder solchen Flugzeugen, die Tiefangriffe fliegen müsste, die ja keine Panzerung haben.
Facing an intense artillery barrage from the Americans, Bernhard is unable to fly close enough to the bridge to score a direct hit.
Und da haben wir gedacht, das wird ein Himmelfahrtsunternehmen, wenn wir da reinfliegen müssen. Aber ich glaube nicht, dass die viel außer Wasserschaden angerichtet hat. Nicht?
Days later, Bernhard encounters an even closer call when faced with an onslaught of American fighter planes.
Und da haben sie mich voll erwischt. Maschine brannte gleich und ich bin viel zu früh ausgestiegen. Dann hing ich über dem Rhein. Und da hatte ich aber Glück, kam 20 Meter am Ufer, kam ich runter.
Bernhard survives the parachute jump from his plane and lands back behind German lines. His mission fails, but he's grateful to make it out alive.
Ja, werde ich nicht vergessen. Da war ich abgeschossen, war aber heil geblieben. Ne?
The Allies' defense of the bridge at Remagen proves to be a huge success. American commanders claim it as a crucial step during their final push towards Berlin, and ultimately victory in Europe. Germany's troops are falling back on both fronts. Desperate to turn the tide, leaders of the Luftwaffe launch a new top-secret weapon to stop the Allied bombers from attacking Germany.
We were flying a mission one day, and all of a sudden, zoom, something came through our formation, and what's that? What's that? Everybody asked. Nobody knew what it was.
This new weapon is the Messerschmitt Me-262 Schwalbe, the world's first jet engine fighter aircraft. Previously, planes have been powered by piston engines with propellers. The Me-262 has no propeller, creating a different flying experience.
The aircraft was easier to fly than any propeller aircraft because it has a nose wheel and it goes absolutely straight at takeoff, and it was no noise, no vibration, nothing. Fantastic. It was like being in a dream.
First Lieutenant Jörg Sipionka flies with a special German unit of Me-262s assigned to hunt down Allied aircraft on their night raids over Berlin.
In March 45, they called me as the junior pilot. They took me to the airfield, and at the base of the runway there was a 262.
Design work on the Me-262 started before the war, but several issues caused delays, and it isn't ready for combat until late in the war. Still, Adolf Hitler and his Nazi commanders believe the Me-262's state-of-the-art technology will help the Luftwaffe overpower the British and American air forces.
It was so innovative, but it was a hit from the very beginning. For me, I thought, this is the future.
The Me-262 is heavily armed with guns and rockets. It has swept wings and can climb to high altitudes quickly. And at speeds of 550 miles per hour, it can go 100 miles per hour faster than the Allies' fastest aircraft.
Nobody ever got a shot at it. It just come by so fast.
What makes this single-seat German fighter plane so revolutionary are the twin Umo 004 turbojet engines.
The Umo engines, outside of a couple of flaws and the material it was built out of, are extremely similar to this day to modern jet engines.
Like many aviation developments, the Me-262's jet engines stem from a need to make aircraft go faster and to generate greater thrust. Thrust is the force that moves an aircraft forward. It counters drag, the force that pushes back. The greater the thrust is than the drag, the faster the aircraft travels. This new jet engine generates thrust with a mixture of compressed air and fuel that's ignited. The burning gases blast out through the back of the engine, thrusting the aircraft forward.
The performance was just off the charts compared to all the propeller-driven airplanes.
The ME-262's superior speed requires Sipyanka and the other pilots to devise new methods for attacking the slower enemy bombers.
The basic strategy of the ME-262 in combat would be to come in from above high and fast. It would shoot as it went by you, and essentially the Allied pilots didn't have a chance to counter that.
It was very suited in our capacity as a night fighter. Fast, heavy armament, go up, shoot, and come down. That's it.
During one of his night flights, Sipyanka encounters a British bomber known as the de Havilland Mosquito, returning from a bombing raid over Berlin.
And he came into my range, and I made a brief, so only 3 rounds. And the Mosquito started burning on the engine on the right side and was hit and fell down.
The ME-262 proves to be successful, but it comes too late in the war to alter Germany's path toward defeat. Bombing raids, material shortages, and other production delays keep the ME-262s in short supply, and only a few hundred make it into combat. But the technology of the ME-262 has a lasting legacy.
The ME-262 symbolizes advance in technology and aviation development at its finest.
With the introduction of the Messerschmitt ME-262 Schwab, the jet engine is here to stay. It influences further generations of jet aircraft and revolutionizes aviation around the world. In the Pacific, after years of destructive fighting, America is on the move and on the hunt for Japanese ships.
Somewhere in the Pacific, a U.S. Navy carrier task force steams into Japanese waters.
Navy pilot Robert Turnell is part of that naval fleet called the Fast Carrier Task Force, stationed aboard the aircraft carrier USS Wasp.
It consisted of 5 task groups. There were 20 carriers in that task force, which is a lot of airplanes.
Naval warfare has changed drastically since the start of the war. Instead of ship-to-ship combat, fought mostly by battleships. Opposing ships now may never even get close enough to see each other. Now, fighter planes are launched into the sky from aircraft carriers, a revolutionary concept at the time. They battle one another in the air and shoot at targets below.
The sky is filled with flaming tracers and shell fire.
The Fast Carrier Task Force further enhances this strategy. By grouping several carriers together into a flotilla, the Americans create a highly mobile floating airbase that can act as the main striking force against the Japanese military.
Probably 1,600 or 1,700 aircraft in that flotilla. All we did was go up and down the Pacific and hit targets.
In order for this carrier task force strategy to work, the U.S. Navy must control the skies. But its primary fighter plane, the Grumman F-4F Wildcat, is slower, heavier, and less nimble than its Japanese rival, the legendary Mitsubishi A6M0.
The Zero's light weight helped make it extraordinarily maneuverable. It was a superb dogfighting platform, and it was a better fighter than the F-4F Wildcat.
The Wildcat was an aircraft that you had to be an athlete to learn how to fly it, because all the controls were manual.
Because the Wildcat is so difficult to fly, engineers at Grumman Aircraft take a hard look at its flaws and replace it with an entirely new fighter plane, the F-6F Hellcat.
The F-6F was designed with one purpose in mind, and that was to defeat the Japanese Zero.
Extensive technological and mechanical improvements are made to the Hellcat, including automatically deploying landing gear. Previously, pilots had to crank it up and down by hand. The landing gear itself is also strengthened to better withstand hard landings on the pitching deck of a carrier. In addition, The Hellcat's cockpit is designed to sit higher, giving the pilot better visibility when engaging in combat and landing on a carrier. Another improvement is the addition of a state-of-the-art Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine. At 2,000 horsepower, the Hellcat is about 70 miles per hour faster than the Zero.
Its extreme speed, both in climb and in dive, gave the Hellcat an enormous advantage over the lightweight Zero.
The Hellcat was a much better fighter. It was bigger, had more speed. It was just a much better airplane.
To allow more planes to fit onto an aircraft carrier, Grumman co-founder Leroy Grumman implements a concept called bio-inspired engineering. He uses an example in nature: a bird folding its wings back to influence a new wing folding system called the stow wing. The stow wings use a series of hinges to pivot and fold backward to tuck close to the Hellcat's fuselage. This bio-inspired wing saves enough space to double the number of planes that can be packed onto a carrier. More planes equals a stronger defense.
Official Navy pictures show a deck load of death ready for delivery.
With these improvements, engineers succeed in helping the Hellcat become the Navy's #1 fighter and its answer to defeating the Zero in combat, as Turnell experiences firsthand during a dogfight.
And there were 8 Zeros in the air. And each one that came down, there was an F6F sitting there with the guns loaded and cocked and ready to go. And we shot down 8 of them.
With its numerous technological innovations, the Hellcat goes on to become one of the most versatile fighter planes of World War II, helping the U.S. Navy to assert superiority over the skies, and the Fast Carrier Task Force contribute to Allied victory in the Pacific. The war's end is in sight. After nearly 6 years of fighting, Berlin is being bombed into submission by the Soviet Union, while American and British troops pursue the last Axis powers in Germany and Austria.
From all sides, Allied might crushes in on the remains of the Wehrmacht, bringing home the horrors of war to the German people as they have never experienced it before.
German pilot Sergeant Wilhelm Siemenssohn feels the end is near.
Die Amerikaner waren schon in Steyr, schon in Salzburg, schon in Passau.
Adolf Hitler, the German chancellor and leader of the Nazi Party, is dead, having committed suicide in an underground bunker just 3 days earlier. Knowing the war is lost and that they will likely be charged with war crimes, high-ranking German officers try to escape. At his assigned post in Austria, Siemenssohn receives his final order of the war.
Und an diesem 3. Mai bekam unsere Gruppe ein Fernschreiben von der Luftflotte Generaloberst Ritter von Greim, der letzte Oberkommandierende.
Siemenssohn is ordered to fly undetected to a predetermined meeting point to help top Nazi commanders evade capture. He is handpicked for the mission because of his experience piloting one of the most versatile non-combat airplanes in the German Air Force, the Fieseler F156 Storch.
Und da bekam ausgerechnet ich, wir waren ja noch so ein Dutzend Flugzeugführer, dass da alle Fiedler Störche dahin beordert worden sind, um noch irgendwelche berühmten Leute irgendwo hinzufliegen.
Orders like this are common throughout the war, with the Germans relying on the Storch for a variety of missions, from reconnaissance to transportation of officers, often important missions requiring a reliable and dedicated pilot.
Also jede Einheit, muss ich sagen, hatte einen Fiedler Storch. Wenn der Kommandeur mal zu irgendeiner Besprechung fliegen musste, zu irgendeinem höheren Stab oder was, so hatte man einen Fiedler Storch als Kurierflugzeug dabei.
What makes the Storch valuable for these types of missions is its ability to take off and land in very short distances.
The Fieseler Storch is extremely unique in that it was the first STOL, which is an acronym for short takeoff and landing.
The ability for short takeoffs and landings allows the Storch to access areas that are much more difficult, if not impossible, for other airplanes that need longer runways.
You can get in and out of extremely small places. You don't need an airport or even a runway per se. You just need a small meadow to get a fuselage storage in and out.
The storage's STOL capabilities are due first and foremost to its extreme lightweight construction.
They were able to achieve that by making a lightweight airframe out of tubing and wood and fabric.
The lightweight qualities of the storage help with something in aeronautics called loading factor, the ratio of the plane's lift to its weight. Its long wings and light frame give it a loading factor of just 10 pounds per square foot, only a fraction of other German planes, helping it maintain lift even at very low speeds.
Den kann man bis 55 Stundenkilometer in der Luft halten. Und fliegt 150 Stundenkilometer Reisegeschwindigkeit.
The storage's unique abilities are made famous in 1943, when one is used to rescue Italian dictator Benito Mussolini from a rugged mountaintop compound. For Siemenssohn, these same STOL characteristics allow him to carry off his last mission of the war as he takes off for the woods of Austria to help Nazi officers escape. But Siemenssohn is determined to save someone else and brings on board a desperate stowaway, his wife.
Ich konnte sie ja offiziell nicht mitnehmen, aber ihr Gepäck war im Storch.
Siemenssohn and his wife successfully land at the designated meeting point in a small clearing, but further orders never arrive.
Und da habe ich dann den Krieg auf eine Rechnung beendet.
Siemenssohn surrenders to the Allies as the war in Europe finally comes to an end. His love of flying is tainted by the harsh realities of war.
Aber was mich so sehr betrübt, um nicht zu sagen bedrückt, ist die Tatsache, dass die Erfüllung eines Menschheitstraumes, nämlich das Fliegen, zu einem Massenvernichtungsmittel verkommen ist.
With the defeat of Germany, the Allies turn their attention to the Pacific and their final fight to victory in World War II. United States warships bombard the tiny volcanic island of Iwo Jima. As U.S. Marines advance over the black beaches of this rocky Japanese stronghold, combat erupts into one of the most violent and relentless struggles of the war. After 36 days of intense fighting, the Allies gain control of the island. The victory gives them a strategic airbase closer to Japan for attacks against its main islands. But they need help.
The B-29s were flying missions over Japan, and they had terrible casualties from the Japanese from the long 16 or 17-hour flight with no fighter escort.
U.S. Army Air Force's pilot, Jerry Yellen, is in the 78th Fighter Squadron, a unit now assigned to escort the Boeing B-29 bombers on their missions. His unit flies the North American P-51 Mustang, a sleek fighter plane with a powerful Packard Merlin engine and graceful handling in the skies.
That was the airplane of the day. There's no question about it. It's like flying a Gazelle because the P-51 was very light on the stick and it was very responsive to what you were doing in maneuvers.
The P-51 is capable of flying longer distances than other fighters, making it an ideal escort plane to protect the B-29s during raids. But the missions to Japan and back are long and dangerous. The P-51s must travel 1,500 miles round trip over ocean waters without navigation equipment and with few landmarks to guide their way back to the 8-square-mile island of Iwo Jima. If they can't find it, pilots risk running out of fuel and disappearing into the vast Pacific Ocean.
8 square miles of land is really just a pinprick in the ocean.
Navigation is critical, but P-51 pilots are a one-man crew with little time to look at maps.
When you fly fighter planes, you can't be looking in the cockpit. You have to be looking outside the cockpit.
Navigating in a little fighter plane over miles and miles of empty ocean is sort of a lonely and scary experience.
Without GPS or radar technology available to them, One of the ways fighter pilots went from place to place without getting lost was through radio navigation.
We couldn't navigate at all over water, but we did have a radio, and when we learned how to fly, we flew the beam.
Pilots flying the beam use radio range navigation to guide them by following a moving target, typically a B-29 bomber aircraft. During missions, ground attacks and dogfights may cause fighter pilots to lag behind the B-29s. To help them find their way back, the B-29 navigators transmit radio signals in Morse code, which are picked up by the straggling fighters.
If you strayed to the right, you would hear Morse code say a U. And then if you got to the other side of the beam, you might hear a D. If you were straight on the beam, you would hear just a solid tone in your earphones.
We could pick up that sound behind a B-29 about 30 or 40 miles. So that's the way we navigated back over the ocean.
This low-tech navigation system saves the lives of many fighter pilots, allowing them to cross the daunting Pacific and land safely at their base on Iwo Jima.
The memory of every day and the pure purpose of every day that I fought for my country is permanently embedded in my memory.
Yellen and other fighter pilots who fly the beam demonstrate the innovative and resourceful use of technology that helps the United States gain air supremacy over Japan and ultimately claim victory in the Pacific.